Hey guys, this is Joanna. I'm the co-founder of Soon. Here I'm joined by my good friend here, Neil, from the project Dawn. And we're here at the Solana office. I'm here challenging myself to talk to the 100 most insightful founders in crypto. And Neil is definitely one of them. Let's talk about your backstory. Yeah. How did you get into crypto? How did you get started?
Yeah, so Joanna, thanks for having me on here. So the backstory for what we have built is actually a company called Andrena, which is kind of the Web 2 side of the Web 3 piece of Dawn. So they work hand in hand. The vision for Andrena really started when I was living in an apartment in Princeton, and I was had to pick an internet service provider, and the only option that I had just sucked and was just super expensive. I'm not gonna name names because many different reasons, but point being is I was just kind of annoyed by that whole process, right? And it's funny how just this one level of small annoyance just transitioned and kind of shaped my whole career. Yeah. It's a little bit weird to admit that, but I just started asking the question why is this the case? Why is it that I don't have options for better internet service providers? Why is it that when I look at my phone and I see the power of wireless on a day-to-day basis, do we not have a better way of doing things? And so I really got inspired by these things called community-powered mesh networks, right? So there was the favorite one that always inspired me was this one in Catalonia, Spain called GuiFiNet, GUIFI.net. And it was essentially just a bunch of people that were able to buy this wireless hardware and just throw it up on top of roofs and form these links with each other. And so you ended up creating this community-powered network, I think of over around 40,000 nodes of people all throughout Catalonia, Spain, and into Portugal and all that kind of stuff. And so it really demonstrated the power of what can you do when a few people come together to solve a really big problem. And that was when I kind of first fell in love, I guess, with the idea of crypto. Yeah. It's when you kind of see hey, how are people able to build new infrastructure together and go about solving these massive problems that we have in the internet today? That was really where I kind of fell in love with crypto. And this was I guess 2017, 2018 timeline. And that's when I first, started seeing all of the, workings of Helium and got really inspired by that. But ultimately, I ended up not going down the crypto route at first. I was hey, you can use wireless to build these new networks. But I just didn't think that crypto was ready, unfortunately. I think Helium kind of proved me wrong in many different ways. And I kind of wish I had the courage at that point to have done, what they ended up doing. But we ended up scaling up a network from 2020 to 2023 from 1 state to 10 states across the US. Now we're providing internet to over 12,000 households. It's just it's been an incredible journey to have this one point of frustration, see what technology you can take and modify and make it better to really solve this cool problem. And then in the process of all of that, we realized, and we're obviously involved with Helium, we were at one point the second biggest deployer of Helium. We realized hey, if we could take all this technology that made our lives better and easier and we could really build out a bunch of cool networks, what if we kind of did the Helium strategy such that anybody could participate with us and help us grow these networks? And that was kind of the end of 2023 into 2024 when Dawn started to kind of come out from the work that we've done.
Yeah, except you were building the decentralized network for broadband.
Yes.
Bandwidth, yeah, it's internet bandwidth as opposed to the mobile network.
Exactly, and that's kind of the big difference. We really haven't seen anybody tackling this problem is when you take a look at these community-powered mesh networks like the one GuiFiNet that I was inspired by, there is a real opportunity to be able to take that, to standardize it, and to scale it with a token-incentivized trustless model. And that's, I think, where Dawn comes in to fill that gap.
Yeah, absolutely. And the addressable market is so big, right? I mean, as you said, it's one annoyance that many of us have experienced before. Yeah. And everybody who have seen the options on the market, I would not name them either. It's realizing, right, they're being overcharged, because there's a new monopoly or new duopoly happening, and then what's the real technical issue? I guess I'm trying to understand that you guys solved is that last mile problem, right, to connect the last bit of the data storage connection to the end user.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So I think when we look at kind of internet, right, to your point, we see the monopoly and duopoly. A lot of that is honestly, I don't honestly think it's anybody's fault. The reason it's just because it's expensive, right? it's expensive, and it's the reason why you don't have multiple different power companies offering electricity in an area, because you're not going to re-spend thousands of dollars per home to rerun that same infrastructure towards them. So it kind of naturally lends itself towards the monopoly side of stuff. Yeah. But as is the case with monopolies, it can kind of go in many different directions, where if it's not done in a fair, transparent way, if there's no a proper competition, you kind of have some of the problems that we have today. And so what we're now presented with, especially in the year really started in 2024, all around the world, had this new bit of technology, I guess, what is called point-to-multipoint wireless. We finally got to a point where wireless could talk to many different nodes, so it could broadcast to many different downstream receiving nodes with a multi-gigabit capacity. And that was, I think, kind of the big unlock that the wireless industry has brought about that allows now an opportunity to make it a new type of internet. What you really need is scale, and wireless before was kind of relegated to doing point-to-point connections. So if I wanted to connect to you, we would have to just connect, and we could do that. But if I wanted to connect to Jake behind the camera, we'd have to set up another pair of antennas, for example, and connect that way. And that just doesn't scale if you have to deploy.
And you have to know him.
I have to know him, exactly, right? You have
it's not a permissionless.
Exactly. And that's kind of the problems of before 2023, 2024. That's what wireless gave us. But in 2024, it started getting where one node could broadcast to many point-to-multipoint and do it at the speeds of fiber. And so now all of this entire exercise is how do we take that technology and bring it to as many people as fast as possible so that they can get better access to internet that actually has competition, that actually leverages better prices and stays away from the expensive infrastructure that we see it as today. So that's kind of the broadband mission in a nutshell, is just take this wireless technology, add a permissionless, standardized protocol on top of it such that anybody can participate without having to be an expert. They can contribute just a little bit of value, and now you can branch this off to as many people as possible. And so what I always like to say is, if we do our jobs right, we'll have done to internet what solar panels have did to electricity. So, the same way that consumers can own their own infrastructure, get access to a very cheap resource, and sell their surplus back to the grid, right? You're kind of the same way solar panels just democratize the third utility of power, we're just trying to democratize the fourth utility of internet.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we talked about this before the meeting, the whole idea of the giga economy, right?
Yeah.
Really empower people to participate in this marketplace where, as you said very well, you have the surplus, you can just ship it to your neighbors, right? And then it's very kind of self-sufficient without having the intermediary. What do you think about the, kind of we talked about this briefly earlier too, the cold start, right? How do you actually get people to start using it, because they do have this existing option, right? You're disrupting a very, very big, monolithic giant that has been around for many years, that people have become to trust. So how do you kind of get people to start using the service first?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's a big power to what crypto does, right? You kind of take these individuals that are very much so like-minded and kind of believe in this idea of creating a new internet, and you give them an opportunity to be able to monetize that, right? I think it's kind of any marketplace kind of has the same problems, but I think the part that we have that's going for us quite nicely is we don't need a lot of network supply to be able to provide value. And the easiest example that I can give is at home, I'm paying $128 for my internet connection, but I'm actually using Dawn infrastructure to be able to broadcast to my three neighbors, and they each pay me $30. So we're in effect just splitting the internet bill across our shared condo area that we have at home. And that's an example of one convenient way that I see as a great opportunity to get started is there's oftentimes all across the world in apartment buildings where if you know your neighbor, you just share your Wi-Fi information with them and you do that. But that's not secure, and a lot of silly stuff can happen when you want to stream stuff. So what we want to do is kind of take that notion of close range internet sharing and just put it on steroids. And I think that's kind of one key piece of the equation is we just want to make it easy for anybody to be able to monetize their spare bandwidth wherever they are across the world. But then on the flip side, we also think about scaling this directly by working with providers like Andrena ourselves, or anybody else that kind of believes this mission and tried to do what they could themselves. We see Dawn as an accelerant by which they can use our technology to provide coverage to as many people as possible. And so a good example of this is if you look at data centers, right? Data centers, they are kind of mostly just a large building for digital infrastructures like routers, servers, switches, storage, all AI clusters, all this kind of stuff. And they're primarily just a real estate company where they just house and rent all of the space for people to live there, right? Whether you're Amazon, whether you're us, whoever that is. But they started getting kind of savvier, right? In the sense that said, hey, we have a lot of these tenants, let's just give them more value add. And so what they started doing was they started buying all of this data from all of these carriers that were already located there and started blending it together. So if you were like a gaming company or cloud company, you don't have to worry about the internet you're peering with at that location. You can just go to the data center and they'll give you what they call a blended IP transit service. So they've essentially become their own little internet providers within their building. And so then the next logical question is like, hey, in a world where you can beam internet, why are you just constraining it to your own building? And so you can see a world in which data centers can now use their existing infrastructure, or anybody that is at a data center, and broadcast that signal further for anybody to tap into that. So I'd say when we kind of consider our go-to-market, you kind of have like this close range internet sharing in the retail environment, and then you also have this wholesale enterprise environment where anybody can broadcast it from miles and miles away using these outdoor antennas.
Yeah. And that's where I think this network effect starts to really show, right? When you have partnerships with the data center that have the distribution, so you can just, by partnering, like the B2B kind of approach, B2B2C, right? You're reaching a lot more households. I know that's one of your KPIs, like reaching. Yeah. What is the number, the magic number that
we're getting to? So the objective for the protocol is getting to 100 million households.
100 million households.
Yeah, so it's a little bit, probably closer. We want to aim for like 110, 120. We're trying to create a network that's effectively twice the size of Comcast, just located all across the world, and have it be a gigabit-based network.
Yeah. That's a very ambitious plan, but I think you have an objectively a good way towards that. When you talked about the innovation that you're making, especially on the on the hardware side, tell me more about the black box. Why does that lead to this 100 million household dream?
Yeah, so the objective for both the protocol, and we can talk about sort of the protocols in general, but the objective for the protocol and the technology and the hardware is to make it so that everybody has an incentive to get involved in deploying DAWN, where it doesn't matter how big you are. You don't have to be a professional network operator. You can just be a person that has a single family home, an apartment unit where you rent, and you want to just get a wireless transmitter to be able to broadcast. You have an incentive to be able to do that, and it's providing clear value to everybody. And part of what we've had to do is make the technology performant enough to be able to do that. And that was what we've done in terms of making our individual nodes, right? Our nodes are actually software-based routers, right? It's like not a common thing that's done in the network industry. People typically go with expensive, high-performant, application-specific boxes. But we wanted to build a more kind of open source, virtualized box that could actually compete against those at a much cheaper rate. So we focused on building high-performance networking products using technologies like DPDK and VPP, which we don't have to get into. But then we simultaneously pair that with a user experience that allows anybody to be involved in this without having to be an expert. Right. And so even though my mom is like a very smart person, I still think from her perspective, which she views stuff very critically, like, how do I use this? Like, she's like, has like the UX mindset.
And your dad works with you.
Yes, and my dad works with us as well. So I oftentimes.
So you cannot use him as the normal benchmark.
No, yeah, I can't use him as the normal benchmark. But I do think from the perspective of my mom and anybody who just maybe hasn't even heard of crypto, but I want to give it so that they can participate on both the supply and the demand side without having to be experts. And that, I think, is kind of what the challenge that we often have at crypto is like, we can build a product just for our own ecosystem, but I think it's all about expanding the market, right? Like whoever can expand the crypto market is going to do a really good thing for this industry. Right. And so our objective is really just make it so that anybody can participate with probably the most familiar digital product that we all have, which is our internet subscription, right? So that is kind of how I think about what the goal is for our nodes, right? Take performance and take ease, put them together so that anybody can get involved. And in the process of building that, that's what's actually brought us towards building the black box. And so in the first piece that I mentioned about this performance, we realized we could get this performance if we virtualized the operations of a router into building a software router. It could be cheaper and more performant than the existing stuff out there. And then we started running with this idea is like, hey, what if you could actually virtualize other workloads that are not just your router, right? What if you could start virtualizing cloud storage, AI, all of this kind of stuff? And that was really what got us towards building the black box, which is essentially the router for all of DePIN, right? We're trying to build this hardware platform for all of DePIN and use DAWN plus cheaper internet as a reason for people to get involved. And so if I can say it in like a nutshell, it's designed to be a replacement to your household router that not only participates as your Wi-Fi router like you commonly have, not only does it participate in Dawn and allows you to share internet to other people, but it's also got storage, a lot of cores on a processor, a GPU as well, so you can participate in AI, right? You can participate in decentralized storage. And so the idea is that you can earn rewards across all of these different projects just by having this one box. And so the vision that we talked about before is like, and this is like what I ask for the users, anybody that listens, is like, give me 1 square foot in your home and I will work with my team and a whole bunch of other people to bring you a user-powered internet. Like that's the real objective, is that if the home, the individual user is the one that uses that 1 square foot to build a new internet rather than data centers, consolidated hyperscalers and all that kind of stuff, we actually have an opportunity of building an equitable digital future. And I think the black box is like the end state of that. Like I looked at saying like what has to exist in order for a future like this to be possible, and then I built it, right? So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the more crypto native way of saying is you're building the L1, the settlement layer for all
hardware,
DePIN projects.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. So you kind of create this 1 square footage, I don't know the right word, real estate, like for everything that you can do within your household.
And that comes back to what we were talking about earlier. Like I think the one thing that consumers should realize is that with the growth of what we've seen with AI and the demand for real estate in GPUs, there is no limit to how much digital infrastructure we see that we're going to need over the next 10, 20 plus years. And it's only a matter of time until this infrastructure looks for cheaper footprints to live. And the one power that homes have, which they don't realize, is you guys, me included, we have the cheapest footprint in the world, right? If you want reliable connectivity, power, with the ability to somebody actually monitor that stuff and make sure it's safe, nothing beats the home, right? It's just the cheapest real estate footprint. So as AI looks to scale and grow, those GPUs and those clusters are going to look for homes that are naturally cheaper, right? And so that is kind of the one scarce resource that we have for all of this. And the black box, to your point, is the platform that's designed to actually be able to use that 1 square foot to be able to contribute towards this internet.
Yeah. You have a very grim future view of the AI.
Yeah. We were talking about that earlier as well. I'm pretty skeptical on this sort of stuff, but I do think that the ways in which homes can get more equity in the abstract sense, the better that it is. And I think one higher multiple form of equity is just digital infrastructure. Right? It's the same reason that a home is valued more when it has solar panels. It's because it's that, it's just providing more value for the household, for the grid and all that stuff. And I think the same thing will be thought of for digital infrastructure as well, is that if your home is capable of powering the internet of the future, that's just more quote unquote home equity that you're creating.
Right. As your job is getting disrupted by AI, at least you can keep your household intact. And start earning some, digital tokens. Speaking of token, I wanted to maybe get into this a little bit, right? You guys have been a really successful DePIN project, have basically already on the journey of finding product market fit. Now you're thinking about, your tokenomics, thinking about, going out with that launch. So help me understand, as somebody who may not be able to use your product, what is the value proposition of owning the token? Yeah,
so the token, as we kind of think about it like classically from the Dawn standpoint, the token is really a proxy for the value of all of the broadband activity that's on the network. And so our objective is to create this protocol by which anybody can participate in the delivery of internet and the consumption of internet. And so my goal is to make sure that all last mile activity across the world for last mile internet activity across the world is captured on Dawn. And the reason is because it's going to lead to better prices for consumers, it's going to lead to less management for operators, and it's going to lead to better transparency as well. So I think it's like we're creating this kind of well by which there's a strong incentive for everybody to come into that gravity well for the last mile of internet connectivity. But then as a result, the token is an incentive layer to be able to do this. It's a scarce resource way for people to be able to operate on that. Like one of the things we talked about was staking tied towards spectrum allocation, right? Spectrum is just a scarce resource. We don't have an infinite amount of it. So we're tying these crypto economic incentives and this trustless layer by which people can get access to spectrum, and that access can be enforced. And so we kind of think about all of these different moving parts that exist in our protocol, right? You have this interoperability layer, you have this economic layer, right? You have this hardware technology layer. And Dawn is just a token whose value is associated with the growth of this decentralized network. So as more broadband activity gets consumed on chain, that has a direct impact in terms of this.
Nice. And then in terms of like the utility of tokens, so you mentioned one thing is the incentive, right? So for anyone who wants to be part of the project, spin your own node, spin or use the black box to start participating, right? You get that token incentives, and the second part is uses to stake it and to basically as a way to pay other participants in order to like do the marketplace.
Exactly. Yeah, it's really just a utility token for mediating the exchange in a marketplace. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Nice. That's exciting. And then what else is on the horizon? Any recent focus that we can be on the lookout for?
And I'm trying to think what makes most sense. I mean, I think like the black box, I'm glad we got the chance to talk about that one.
Yeah.
I think it's, the more that I've been thinking about it, the more that I just realized it's like, what we're building on the black box, I think is kind of an inevitability of the future in the sense that like, there's nothing unique about what we have brought to the table. It's just kind of recognizing this trend that of course has been accelerated by AI, but it's just only a matter of time, right? And we talked about this a little bit. This is what I encourage everybody to think about as well. Is if you're an investor and you want to enter the market of like deploying AI infrastructure today, you have to be comfortable with the fact that deploying GPUs might be like a 10 to 15% yield. And we were laughing about it earlier, but it's like kind of weird that the return profiles of GPUs, supposed to be a higher margin digital infrastructure, is the same as real estate. And so the point being is that I think that digital infrastructure is getting so optimized and so efficient that it's only a matter of time until it looks for the most cost-effective place to exist, which is going to be you, the user. And so I would just say, like, my overall thing, which we obviously try to help with, is just stay plugged into DePIN. Like, look at how all of these different protocols, whether it's Helium, Inference, Pipe, Blockcast, Daylight. There's so many different people that are out there that are building individual pieces of what this new internet is going to look like. And I think there's going to be so many great opportunities to get involved over the next couple of years because like AI just continues to grow.
Yeah. And I think the black box idea is so helpful to think it's not like a direct replacement of the router, right? That you already have, coming from your existing carrier services. It provides that, additional benefit if you were to partner with these guys that has the distribution.
Exactly, and so my challenge is like kind of what I said earlier, right? My goal is like, give me that 1 square foot across your homes and we will build a new user-powered internet together. That form and the way that we go to market, like I love for that to be as much as possible with retail, but there's a very good argument that it should be part of the providers as well. And part of the concern that I've seen with sort of this stuff, so we need to obviously tread lightly, is whenever the providers have actually a history of putting your router in your home that does value for them and you don't get part of that compensation. Like there's like a good example, like I'm not gonna name any names, but like there's a famous Wi-Fi hotspot, right? This ID that you see pretty much everywhere in New York, where you click on it and you can use your existing subscription to get on there, right? They're literally using your bandwidth in your home without telling you for this sort of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so I say that the providers are already going to start doing stuff like that. So in a world where, I can imagine a world where they start bringing black boxes into your home and you actually don't get a share of that.
Right.
So that's why I'm very careful about saying like the retail's got to be at the center of all of this because I want the individual household to be what captures the value of all of it.
This also involves going outside the US, right?
Yeah.
Going to these remote areas where the carrier themselves may not even reach, you may have better chances of reaching, right? By talking to the right people, to the right data centers, for instance. I know you have a little bit of a success story there, but have you had any experience with, outside of the US, like emerging markets?
Yeah, so we've been looking at, there's actually quite a few PRs that we have lined up, press releases we have lined up. Like we have one that we're working on right now for a Ghana-based announcement that we've worked with because we just teamed up with a local provider that's there. And to your point, what's fascinating about this is like our job is oftentimes made easier because so much investment has gone into like mobile infrastructure.
Yeah.
Like if you look at like why what we're doing at Dawn is possible, it's because there is a wholesale infrastructure. There are data centers, there are subsea fiber optic cables, there are cell towers, there's all this kind of stuff that has led towards a growing ecosystem of just reliable digital infrastructure, at least at the wholesale side. So when I went to go visit in Ghana in November, I was like, we went to go visit a couple of data centers there. I'm like, you can't tell that this is not like a class A prime data center that you would find in New York, for example. And so wholesale infrastructure has gotten so good across all of the world, really. But the last mile infrastructure is what's lacking. Yeah. And then so our kind of focus and why I think we're going to see a lot of success in these emerging markets is because that's just the gap that they have, right? They have the good wholesale. The last mile needs a little bit of love, a little bit of help, and with the right technology, namely wireless, that tends to be cheaper, the right incentive coordination layer, I think it's only a matter of time, right? There's too much economic incentive for this infrastructure to get built out, for all of this infrastructure to find a home in cheaper locations. So I think it's going to be quite exciting to be able to build this out all across the world, especially in areas that really need it the most.
Yeah. Isn't that exciting that you're actually solving a problem that Web2 cannot solve?
I know, that's crazy.
That's a very rare moment, right?
Exactly, and it's crazy too. It's like, I mean, when we think about this, is like part of this is like you obviously have like a token incentivized layer that just does like a really good job of kind of bootstrapping networks wherever they are. Yep. But I think when you also kind of exist in the crypto ecosystem, you're part of the burden that you have, which is a good burden, is you actually have to build it so that it's trustless. And I think people don't realize oftentimes the scale to which trustlessness can unlock. Because if I can essentially build a network with you and me and we're neighbors, we don't know each other, that just makes it so much easier to be able to operate in this entire marketplace. Yep. And so I think one of the things maybe I don't know if we have enough time to be able to talk about this sort of stuff, but I think like the role of protocols is they kind of allow marketplaces to form, right? They allow people to be able to participate without having to trust or know each other because the interop layer is all there. And I think by kind of unlocking that, there's a lot of cool value that can be created in that process. So crypto, I think, is like at the center, I think, of like a lot of the growth that's going to happen over the next several years from a technology innovation standpoint.
Yeah, this is why we're doing Web3.
Yeah.
Exciting stuff. Really, thank you so much for coming on the show, and we look forward to the next update, and yeah, we look forward to a part 2 of this talk.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.